Of scribbled parchments and stories told. Eager learners with fluttering wings, the welcome song to you we sing. So, in our humble fairy cottage with elfish berries, we set the stage. With warm hearts, we welcome our honorable poet, Miss Sen Mehra.
Oh, wow.
Miss Sen Mehra is the author of Worlds Within, her debut book of poetry, forwarded by the great Gulzar. She is the winner of the Royal International Poetry Prize 2020 for the Best Upcoming Poet. Born in Kolkata, she lived in many cities across India before moving to Chicago, then to Melbourne, and finally to Singapore, where she resides now. She is a busy mother and finds poetry both her sustenance and her refuge. Miss Nandini writes almost every day on a range of subjects that interest her, from personal to political, and everything in between. Her book of poems, Worlds Within, is available in paperback and Kindle editions on Amazon. Now, my friend Nishtha will take over as she speaks on some of the poems that she has read of Mams and she liked very much.
Poetry, according to me, is an expression of emotion and thoughts. It comes in so many different styles because it's written when people are passionate about a topic. People go through moods, peaks and valleys, hard times and gloriously wonderful times. But poetry illustrates it all. Your poem, instead, conveys a very deep message and it seems to touch my soul. The lines, I will write of sunshine instead of hidden valleys and the smoothness of stones, glistening under the water's skin, seems to give poetry a different perspective altogether. It has helped me see things in a more beautiful and more serene manner. The next poem that I would like to talk about is You. The lines, and we sit on this wall on this moon-washed night, two sparks in an infinite sky, and watch in the rise and the fall of our breaths. A million lifetimes go by are my favorite lines from this poem. They are so epic and brilliant. I lost myself while reading this poem and started imagining a moon-washed night and an infinite sky. I love your poems as they seem very real and they help us see things from a new perspective. All of your poems convey beautiful messages and I'm really looking forward to reading more such marvelous poems from you. A lot of your poems have inspired me to be a better person, and I really have no words to appreciate your poetry. Akshita has also read most of your poems, and she's very excited to share her experience with us.
Good evening, ma'am. Poetry, as I believe, has no conservative approach, form, or construction. It does not owe anything, neither does it demand much beyond the senses, because a lot of people have thinking restricted to their senses. And I think your poems, ma'am, have scored a full mark in all these categories. I'm quite new to your work, but I'm enjoying them a lot. The first thing that allured me was the lucid language used, and the next thing were the expressions. Nature, as I've noticed, is a constant expression used in your poems, and they add to the flow. They're so sublime and the meaning so simple that it feels like reading on water. The comparisons, the similes are something which I see are used so often, but the way you've used them to symbolize something so different is commendable. The palms of our hands is an expression I've noticed in a few of your poems, but each time they're used in a completely different and unique way, and to understand that gives me a different sense of joy. Your poem, titled Unspoken, is simply sweet. It seems very enigmatic till the first few lines, but the way you ended it was adorable and I was totally gushing over the lines that said, so he brushed her hair by the light of the moon and she told him her stories. The next poem I'd like to talk about is Thank You or something like that. In this one, the lines have a sense of beauty attached to words, and as I read, the comparisons create a very vivid image in my mind and I never wanted it to end. But out of all, I think my personal favorite is Tea Coffee. From the very first line, which went like, the parts of me that no one wants found the parts of you that no one wants. I was enamored, under the spell of your words, and as I went reading on, it felt like I'm staring at a necklace, each bead or stone as beautiful as the previous one. You ended a few lines with a question that has inspired my own work. To be very honest, it is very hard to select a particular line to be my favorite. This is something I keep coming back to every single day. I don't think I'll ever have words enough to appreciate all that you've written. I love reading them because for those few moments, nothing else matters. I feel an absence of myself, and that's what makes me eager to read more. I am somewhere else, and the reality has no value for that time. I'm really looking forward to reading your book, and I'm sure that, like me, everyone would enjoy your poems. Now, we shall request Ma'am Mehra to read some of her poems to us.
How lovely. I'm quite... Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You know, I'm quite lost for words at the moment. I didn't realize you have read them with so much attention and with so much love, and I'm truly thankful. It's a different kind of a feeling, you know, to be read by young people, because you view the world in such a different way. And of course, most of my readers tend to be a little bit older, so I'm not really exposed to younger people having access to my work. So this is a gift for me, so thank you so much. I was actually planning to read Tea Coffee, but maybe I'll read something else then. What do you think? Maybe I will read. So this book, this is the book, Worlds Within. The way I had thought of these poems was dividing it into heart, mind, and spirit. Just the three things that the three broad buckets that most of my poems seemed to fall into. Maybe some were a little bit of a force fit, but anyway, I had to find a place for them. So I thought I will read from each section to give you a sense of, you know, how the poems are a little bit different, because some draw obviously on relationships and love and longing and all of that. And then there are the nature poems, and then there are poems that have come to me when I've been traveling or I've been missing a certain place where I have lived. And I think I should read the poem on Kolkata. Some, of course, are spirit poems, which in recent years has been more of an exploration, maybe a little bit more than love. So it's really, you know, a journey within and trying to find certain things that are quite knotted inside and trying to see if through my poetry I can discover, you know, the source of those knots and maybe even untie a few of them. Shall we start then with Kolkata? If I can find it, hang on. 108. All right. Okay. Kolkata. My story without end. It seeps into my blood through dust-filled cracks that fan across red oxide floors in my mother's home. The Kalighat Joba, the red hibiscus. It is a promise. It stains my lips, my words. It blooms as it pleases. Kali's beloved, it bows only to one. You altar my feet with such tenderness. You do not look up at me. But when your fingers brush against my ankle in the stillness of a Kolkata afternoon, there is little place to hide. At every bookstore that lines the pavement on my way home, neglected rebels offer a dog-eared Lal Salam. But who has the time to read anymore? My khuri from the roadside tea cellar seems to get smaller every year. Soon that too will become a memory of what it used to hold, a lifetime in one sweetened gulp. So that was Kolkata. Let me read one which is so my view is, of course, poetry is personal, and a lot of times now it is also political, as it always has been. And my way is perhaps a little bit more gentle than, you have a lot of spoken word poets and contemporary poets, and they're very good at being able to translate the rage of our times, right? And somehow, I think it is good to be true to ourselves as poets. So even when I'm writing about political issues or writing about things that bother me or upset me, perhaps my tone is not as harsh, because that's maybe not as true to who I am as a poet and a person. But this one is a little bit of an ironic poem, and it's called The Men. The men now come to take the boys. They take them all, they take each one. To wield the whips, to grease the guns, to slash, to burn, to have some fun. And mothers sit with white-hot rage and lash out with their fire tongues at babies tugging at their legs. The washing still needs to be done. They know what comes when the fun runs out, and in body bags the men return. And sometimes worse, the men come home forever darkened, forever burned. Their eyes speak now of wounds unsaid, no matter if they lost or won. And they sit around and bark and snarl, the animal has them, everyone. And lost to women who loved them once, who sang sweet songs of love and lust, and though they have come home to die, their death no longer by the gun, but bit by bit their insides rot, until at last to save there's none. And still the women live and work to mend, to cook, to raise their sons, who too one day will leave their side, no longer boys when they return. So this is sort of, the reality of how women are impacted so much by the games of men, right? Let me read one which is called, shall I read Hotel Tibet? Has anyone been to Dharamshala? This is a poem I quite like. I lived in Dharamshala for a while as a child. And the cover, actually, this flower is the rhododendron flower, which was abundant there. And somehow these images, these motifs have stayed on in my subconscious of the places I spent my childhood in. Hotel Tibet. A rhododendron bled crimson into my palms, pine needles tattooed songs into my skin, inked from deep crevices within ancient trees. An old church, St. John in the Wilderness, and a lama meet at Hotel Tibet every evening. Over a steaming bowl of thupka, they share stories of a time, some of it seen, some heard. Thukpa, why did I say thupka? Of the treacherous pass under cover of night from Tibet, of old English families baptizing their babies on a Sunday, the older children running feral in the church grounds now overrun. They have heard the story so often they have forgotten. Some were from before their time. They were not there. Remember when. The Dhauladars rise each morning with their golden crowns, majestic, impervious in their absolute power. Who is to say the gods are invisible to the eye? An ice-cold stream cleaves through the mountains. Lamas walk past silently. I splash the waters to see if they turn to look. In the distance, they tell me, is the Tibetan school for orphans. When I hear them chant at dusk, I feel a strange desire to walk in, to chant along with them, but I must go home. Ma will be waiting. The nights in the mountains are deep and they come on so suddenly. Every school day I bounce in a 3-ton truck all the way down to school at Yole Camp. A girl noisily sings Lata Mangeshkar songs while we stick our heads out of the tarpaulin up front and lap at the wind. I wish she wouldn't, but I don't say anything. The day before we left for good, I collected 5 of the smoothest, roundest stones I could find from the shallow stream and shoved them into my pockets. In the dusty, hot summers of Kanpur, I would place one on my flushed cheek and on my eyes and remember, I had wanted to say goodbye, but I didn't know whom to. After all these years, I'm not sure what unlocked within me in the damp forests, the mountains, the valleys of Dharamshala, but perhaps one day a little girl will go trampling through the trees, and amidst the pine cones and needles that carpet the forest floor, she will come upon a rusty key and wonder what treasures it might have unlocked. I'm not sure, but I will never forget. Should we take a break? Are there any questions? Or Farah, how do you want to go about it?
Would you want to read one more?
Sure, shall I?
Beautiful, the rich imagery that you use in all your poems.
Thank
But
you.
my girls want to say something after, you've heard the poems that ma'am has read. Isn't the use of it?
Wonderful.
Yes, Proma?
Proma.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening to everyone. Actually, after listening to your poems, the first image that came to my mind was the vivid description. And the rhythmic flow of the words was really beautiful. I really loved listening to all of them.
Thank you so much, Proma.
The use of imagery in all your poems is very rich. And it's like, yes, it's there every day around us. But to pick it up and weave it so beautifully in verse is what you do, Nandini. That makes it so very special. And so, can you hear one more? And then we leave the floor open for questions.
All right, lovely. I just want to say one quick thing about these imagery. And, I hear a lot of people tell me that they enjoy the metaphors and the similes and the imagery of my poems. And since you all are budding writers, I just want to say that if you write very often, it just comes. For me, the key to that is the more you write, the more it becomes accessible to you. And the more that you can play with the language. You see, like any toy or like any game or like anything else, the more you play with it, the more you have fun with it, the more lightly you can hold it, the easier it will come. So I look forward to next time listening to poems with all your imagery and all your metaphors and similes and love stories.
For sure. Some of them write really well, and we'll call you over again.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, so I'll maybe read Peanut Shells. That was the poem. There's a little bit of a story to this poem. This is the poem that Gulzar Saab had first read. And when he read this is when he told me that you have to publish. And because I'm a bit of a procrastinator, and I kept dodging the whole publishing game because I knew very little about it. And I was just happy writing. But he kept coming back to this poem and saying, Beta, bola tha na, you have to publish. Wo Peanut Shells padha tha na maine? And I was like, yes, I'll do it. So this poem reminds me of his scolding. But I thought I should share this one. Let me bite softly into your desires. They taste of an apology I do not need. We will gather these faded, yellowing dreams left tethered to the bedpost too long. That silent hesitation in your eyes? Look. A little tendril wraps a promise around the iron bars at your window. That squirrel you see every day scurrying across the parapet, an oversized guava between its teeth. There is still time. Meet me on a sunny winter afternoon up on the terrace that opens to the sky. The blue above belies the chill in the air. The sun is yet to concede. I will roll your dreams off the folds of my skirt and lay them down on yesterday's newspapers so they awaken. Soak in the sounds of the streets below. The sanguine sun gently stokes their forgotten fire. Neat rows next to the amla drying, sliced, quartered and salted, eaten well before it can be bottled. The heady tartness and salt will cling to our tongues and lips and fingers, and then that unexpected sweetness when our mouths are at the tap, lapping in relief like thirsty summer puppies. I will find a place to sit, cross-legged as we used to do as children, and sing you a song of death in a language you do not know, and you will crack warm peanuts open and feed us both. And then, among the scattered shells of the past, we will teach each other forgotten things. And in this little corner of the world, all things will be possible. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's like a dream. Possibly it would never end. Last morsel in the mouth that we continuously roll so that we don't lose the taste.
Oh, thank you.
But yes,
That's beautiful.
it's indeed. Take that compliment. It's beautiful.
Thanks so much.
So we'll throw the floor open now for questions. Brace yourself, Ma'am Mehra.
I'm happy to.
Okay. Anushka, would you want to ask the first question?
Ma'am, I wanted to ask, are you satisfied with your writing in general?
Am I satisfied with my writing?
Yes, ma'am, because there are many people who write, but then other people may like it, but they themselves, they don't like it that much.
What a lovely question. Thank you. Thank you. It's a very strange relationship that I have, and I think I've heard a lot of poets or creative people say about our work. You write it in that moment, right? And then sometimes when you go back and read it, you can't recognize where it came from. You don't know where it came from. It's just from that moment. And sometimes someone will, recite a line back to me. And I'm wondering, did I write that? When did I write that? So there is a familiarity with my own work, and there's also a little bit of a distance, which is a bit hard to explain. Some poems, yes, I do like. Some poems I don't like that much after I go back and read them. Because what happens is sometimes my thinking or my way of looking at things may have changed or evolved. So when I go back and read something maybe I wrote 5 years ago, and there's a poem in here, there's one poem in here that I find is from a different time, and maybe I don't like it that much, but some definitely I do. They're like old friends. When I go back and see them, I'm like, yeah, I remember. And I remember where I wrote it, and I remember why I wrote it. So thank you for that.
Okay, Pooja ma'am wants to ask you a question.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Firstly, I want to say that each and every word touches the heart, and it's wonderful. We all loved hearing that, and I would want to read all the poems. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask you one thing. Since when did you start writing? Did it come naturally, or it was since your childhood? Since when did you start writing? I wanted to know.
When I was very little, my mom was a teacher. My mother is an English teacher herself, and she's a primary school teacher. So our summer holidays were in those times quite gadget free. As you know, we had the lovely Doordarshan to watch. So for entertainment, my mother would be like, go and write me a story. And, and she would pick things from around the house, or she would pick something from the street and tell me to write about that. So that's how I started to write. And I think I did have a natural sort of bend towards literature and all of that. So I would scribble a little bit. Then I studied English literature. I did, a course in communications. I started working in PR and marketing. And what happened was, what I loved, words that I loved, became work, became business, became, a corporate sort of a setting. And I think my words hid. For years, while I was working, I don't think I wrote very much poetry in those years. And which I find is so sad, because there were so many interesting people I met. I would have loved to write about them. And only when I stopped working in the corporate field and I could step back, maybe over the last 10 years or so, and I kind of started going more into nature and finding time to take walks and just be with myself a little bit more, then the poems started coming. And I say coming and not as a deliberate act, because I don't know if you can really force a poem, all I can do is maybe be receptive to a poem and be open to it and be empty enough for it to come, and then it comes. So in the last 10 years or so, I've really been writing a lot, and now I write every day. It's become a little bit like breathing. Like if I don't write, it feels like, should I sleep? Can I just go to sleep without writing? How strange. So even if it's a little bit, I'll write something down. Sometimes like half asleep, I'll be scribbling something down. And then the next morning I'd be like, okay, this doesn't work. Okay, let me write something else. But nonetheless, good or bad, of a certain quality or not, I try to write every day. Thank you for your question, Pooja.
Ma'am, that is, I think, a motivation also for all the budding writers.
Just
Thank you
write.
so much. Ma'am. Thank you.
Akshita has a very interesting question.
Yes, ma'am. So I wanted to ask, do you always trust the reader in this world of instant communication and instant gratification?
Do I trust the reader?
Yes, ma'am. Like trust the reviews and what they're trying to say about the poems.
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. It's a really intelligent question, because at what point do you let go, right? At what point do you say, my work is done, which was expressing myself, how it's interpreted, how it's read, whether it's liked or not, is something, you have to kind of and I have to let go of it. Of course, it's always very easy to believe the nice things people say about your work. And and if there's criticism, then perhaps, it's a little bit harder to take. But I think I believe it. To answer your question, I believe it. Because if someone says, look, this poem didn't speak to me, I believe it to be true. And if someone says, I really loved this poem and these particular lines worked for me, then I take that as their truth as well. So there's really no way of me actually knowing what's going on inside anyone's head, or how they're processing it, or how their journey has brought them to the point where they've reached my poem, and what they've interpreted out of it. So I have to take their feedback sort of at face value. And if there's criticism, which is actually always welcome, it's just something to think about and something to be a little bit childlike about, and feel like, yes, of course, I don't know, if my poems are perfect, and I don't know if I write the perfect poems. And there's always growth, there's always change, there's always something to learn. So by and large, I think I would just like to take feedback as it is. Thank you.
Roma has something on a similar note, right, Roma? We were discussing your question.
Yes, ma'am. So,
Ask
ma'am,
me.
my question to you would be, for me, poetry is something that happens when we stop thinking and we start feeling. So, ma'am, how can we incorporate our feelings and our thoughts into the poems without making them seem overexposed or maybe at times pretentious?
That's an interesting question as well. How do you make it not overexposed or pretentious? I think there's a little bit of a checking back mechanism. And I think it's like a muscle. Like I said, the more you use it, the better it works for you. So the more you write, you'll get a sense of whether it is authentically you, right? And if you're a sensitive person, sometimes it's not that you're copying someone else's work, but especially when you're studying so many great writers, and the way you're studying it in school is you'll chop it up and dissect it and take each line apart and look at the entrails and put it back again, So with that kind of involvement into the guts of literature, it's not uncommon that some of that, for instance, may find a place into your work, right? And you take that, and then you also take your own emotions and your own authenticity. And then when you look at the work, when you look at something you've written, if you can take a step back and think, is this me? Is this moment? Is it really what I am? I wouldn't worry so much about overexposing, right? Or being too as a poet, I would say the more true you are, the more that you're able to bring what lies within to the surface, the more powerful your work will be. So I will never encourage anyone to moderate that. If there's anything to moderate, it is to see, is this me? Am I speaking from my deepest truth? Even if it's a funny poem, even if it's a humorous, light-hearted poem, because there's so many influences around us, and sometimes to separate in the social media din as well, what is me, what is the belief of my peer group, what is learned from my teachers. No offense to teachers, of course, but there is this whole process of being able to separate a strand out of everything that you imbibe and say, yes, this strand, however it is, pretty, ugly, beautiful, whatever it may be, is me. And that's the strand you use to write your poetry from.
A few more questions?
Wanted to say that to just let our raw emotions lay down to the pages.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would you like to take a few more questions?
Sure, if there are. Happy to.
Yeah. I think Ma'am Basu would want to ask you one.
Yeah, good afternoon. But it's already evening now, right? Okay. So I just wanted to ask you that, a lot has been said about poets being, being a born poet or you're not a born poet, I mean, whether somebody is a born poet or somebody has to inculcate those, technicalities of writing a poem, or, how to, move on with it, and become a poet. So what is your take on that? I mean, a lot has been said about it, in this whole wide world, I guess. But
Yes.
What is your take on that? Are you, can you really be a born poet? Or rather, do you have to be a born poet, or you really become a poet anyway? Imbibing certain technicalities and otherwise.
Sure. I understand the question. My take on it is a little bit maybe not the purists may not agree, but I really believe in my heart that poetry lives in everybody. Everybody has poetry, everybody has music, everybody has dance. These are primal things. I think of poetry as a primal, it's the beat of the universe. It lives in everyone. Now, some people may have an opportunity to hone their skills. Some people may have a desire to be poets, right? Some people, but if you go back centuries, you think of people gathered around the fire and telling stories and remembering stories through rhyme. You think of people, passing on traditions, passing on secrets, passing on their knowledge through verse. And you realize, we don't have to complicate it necessarily so much, because poetry is so primal. It's in our heritage, and it's in the air, and it's in this human form that we have. So if you think about, of course, how do you evaluate good poetry? How do you, and then you look at things like meter and rhyme, and, is it a lyrical poem or a narrative or a dramatic poem? There is, that has its own place. And perhaps you can teach yourself to be a poet of a reasonable standing and acclaim. But I would think, even if you don't, if you don't consider yourself a poet, or you don't consider yourself an appreciator of poetry, you probably haven't met that poem as yet that will speak to you or that lives within you. So I absolutely believe that yes, it can be taught, but you're not learning something, you're remembering something that's already there inside.
So well said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Koshumbi ma'am has a wonderful question.
Good evening, Ma'am Mehra.
Good evening.
Ma'am, thanks for making time for us. It's a lovely session that we are all experiencing. Ma'am, my question originates rather from an observation. Ma'am, being readers of English literature, we've always have had this notion that poets, irrespective of their gender, are considered to be recluses, social recluse. I mean, they require time of their own, they have a longing for their private space, and they generally avoid gatherings, they generally avoid crowds, and try to be all by themselves to nurture the kind of art that they want to produce. Ma'am, in today's world of social media, where social media and digital platform is an access point both for experiencing the work of others as well as delivering the kind of art that the artist wants to produce. How far do you think that we as readers of literature and we as artists have come from that definition or that age-old notion? How far have we shifted from that notion that artists, specifically poets I mentioned here, are social recluses? Because this is not a notion that we have for stage actors. We know them to be crowd pullers, but unfortunately, we do not know poets to be crowd pullers or very social beings. What is your opinion on this? If I have conveyed my question to you.
I absolutely understand your question, and I think it's a brilliant question. So thank you for asking that. This is, this tension between the need,
conflict of the self. Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what.
There's a need to be alone. There is a need to to let things settle. It isn't about an input-output situation, right? Where you take in a stimuli, you craft a poem, post it on Instagram, and it seems like it's a very quick cycle, a very quick turnaround right now, right? In the times we live in. But I would think that a poem needs to sit, it needs to rest first inside you. You need to have a little bit of time to yourself to be able to really bring out the best expression. Now, the pull and push of social media being what it is, I do think at some point we have to step back. And this is what Farah knows, that I'm quite social in the sense that I post my poems quite frequently. But I do think that it's important to be also able to pull away and have that time to yourself and be quite selfish if you need to be, and not have the sort of a FOMO of other poets are doing this, or so many poets are taking part in this festival, or so many poets got featured in this anthology, or whatever it is. You stay your course. You go inside yourself. You're not competing with anybody else, right? And it may seem a little bit like that in this whole social media fury that happens, where everybody seems to be doing so much. And the ones who have gained that momentum seem to be getting bigger and more popular with very little actual, maybe even new work to show for it. It's just the momentum of, and that's fine, that's the nature of the beast we're dealing with. But if you consider that you need that time, you need that isolation, by all means fight for it. by all means jump off the wagon and take as much time as you need. They say this about psychologists, that the psychologist is the one who, when a beautiful girl walks into the room, is looking at everybody else, right? So even for poets, you might be in a social gathering, you might be on social media, but perhaps you're also looking at everybody else. So you can have a bit of aloneness, you can be alone, and I consider myself to be a little bit of a social recluse in that sense. And I think a lot of the people who read books and are in this world will identify. You can be in a room full of people, right? And you can be alone, right? And that's that quality of aloneness, that quality of being comfortable with your aloneness, of not being seen or seen, not appreciated or appreciated. All of this will help you write with so much freedom. Because you're not looking for those likes. The likes come, it's great. If they don't come, you're still writing. You're writing because you need to write. You see, that's the difference. So being aware of where the writing comes from and what you need to do for yourself is, I think, just a beautiful process of discovery. Thank you for your question. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very
That's
much.
a lovely question. Okay, Pratika, are you there, Pratika? I think Pratika has something to ask, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I want to ask you that whether a bad review sometimes affects your creativity.
Does it affect my creativity? Maybe not. It might affect my mood for a while. It might make me feel a bit glum, and and then reread what I wrote and try to figure out why I got a bad review for that. But and this kind of links to the previous question, and even the other one about where do you let go of a work. So at some point, for me at least, everyone's journey, everyone's perspective is different. If there's a review or if there's a criticism of my work that I feel will strengthen it, or it's a perspective I hadn't thought of, I will respond to it, or I will try and better it. If I feel it doesn't come from a place that I can actually do anything about, then I'll take it, I'll receive it, and I'll kind of let it go. So I'll give you an example very quickly. I had written a poem about doctors. It involved something about doctors. And there's a particular friend of mine who is a doctor, and he happens to have been a COVID doctor, right, over the last year, and working really hard. So in my poem, I wrote as the male, so there was a lot of he did this and he did that or whatever. So someone came back to say that that's highly sexist, and in this day and age, why do you presume that a doctor can only be a male? Right? So firstly, it wasn't my presumption that, that was that person's inference out of one poem, right? So being that as it may, I took that criticism to mean that yes, I can be a little bit more sensitive to not be conditioned to think of certain roles as only for a certain gender. So in a way, it did help me kind of bring something into focus. But in the specific instance where the criticism came, I did not think it was justified, because I actually wrote that poem sort of to make that doctor feel a little bit seen and heard, right? So but that lady who commented did not know this background, so fair enough. To her, it was like, why is this poet writing about a male doctor when there's so many women doctors? So each thing in its own place.
We'll just take 2 more questions, if you're okay. Yes, Sumansa. Sumansa happens to write a lot of poems too.
Nice to meet you.
First of all, hello, Ms. Mehra, and good evening, all of you. I'm a poet myself. I launched my book last year, just a month before yours released. Yours released in the month of November, mine released in October. It was 2nd of October when mine released. So basically, the question that I would like to ask you, I feel this. I mean, I have my personal experiences. I just want to know your point of view. What happens when I generally write, and after I've written something, I feel that I've done a great work. I don't revise my work. Often I've heard people say that, good poets, they revise their work. Once they are done, they revise it. But what I feel, I personally feel that revision of my work makes it some sort of superficial, because poetry is in the moment. As you said, poetry is the beat of the universe. I do believe that. And it's the moment that basically makes me write. That is what I believe. So have you ever experienced such a thing where you've written something and you just don't want to revise it? I do experience that. I do not want to revise my work at all. No matter what. Yeah, obviously, if there's, some sort of a typographical error or maybe, grammatical error, whatever, that revision needs to be done. But I don't change my work. I do not revise it. Do you go through the same sort of a feeling? I would just, love to know that. Thank you.
I actually do. Thank you for your question. I do. I was actually asking a friend who's a filmmaker the other day this question. I was saying, you all do so much editing and chopping and all of that. I can't imagine doing that kind of editing with my poems, because it kind of comes to me complete as it wants to be seen. And then if I chop it and if I try to make it more pleasing to me, I sort of feel like it's doing an injustice to the work as I have received it and as it has flown through me. So I really hear you, and I'm glad I'm not the only crazy person who doesn't really edit and mess with the poem too much. I let it be.
I feel the essence is lost. If you're working too much with it, the essence is lost.
Yes, and perhaps that also is a process of time, right? Like when you're just starting out. I can't remember if I edited more when I was younger. Possibly not, but I can imagine for someone who's just starting out, they may think they need to edit it to make it look a little bit more like a poem, or make it feel a little bit more like it has meter and it has rhyme, and it's sort of, as you get a little bit more comfortable with the medium, you might learn to just let it be.
Yeah, that is what even I believe.
Lovely.
Thank
Great insights there. Thank you so much.
I would like to intrude here. One of my girls was speaking to me yesterday about how important meter is. Which one of you was it? Can you just ask ma'am that question?
Yes, ma'am, it was me, ma'am. I was asking that when you start writing a poem, do you first think about the structure, the literary devices you want to use in the poem, or does it just comes with the flow?
For me, the poem flows first from an idea, right? Or it could be a thought, it could be a color, it could be a moment that I have witnessed. It could be a longing that I have felt, right? So the origins of the poem can be from anywhere in terms of impressions. The way it comes into the poem, I sort of feel, and this links to the earlier question as well, I sort of feel like I don't really control the flow or the devices used. It's almost like in hindsight, I can go back and say, okay, so this, I did an alliteration there. Or, there's a simile here, or there's a metaphor here. But when I'm writing, I'm thinking in terms of images, maybe, if that makes sense. If I'm looking at a cloud and I'm imagining the cloud as something else, I'm imagining it in a teacup, I'm actually seeing a visual in my head and trying to be true to that visual. So a lot of the evaluation of the poem on these literary devices will happen post-production. The production itself just happens as it does.
Sulagna ma'am has a question, and I promise I'll stop after that.
No worries.
So nice to hear you, ma'am. You just took me to Dharamshala. I have been there, and the words that you spoke, it was like I was with you there. Ma'am, I would like to know, how do you choose? Like, does it come natural, things around you affecting you, or is there some kind of backup plan for your next theme or topic that you are going to write on?
Is it natural or planned?
I think I would have to say it is natural, right? In the sense that things happen in my daily life, and if I've had a day which is a little bit unusual, then those elements will stick in my head, or something will stick and form itself into a poem. Yes, but I can't say the same for maybe the political poems or issue-based poems, where those kind of brew, right? Like an issue happens and I'm sensitized to it, and I'm reading about it, and over a period of time, it might result in a poem. Like when Black Lives Matter, something blows up, and then I wrote a poem a little bit after that called "Your Knee is on My Neck."
Okay.
So, it kind of built up. That wasn't derived from my immediate daily life. But yesterday I wrote a little bit of a funny poem because a snail actually crawled onto my foot when I was standing on my balcony. And I didn't realize the snail had crawled onto my foot. I walked all around my house. It was a little snail. And as I entered the other room, I came out of the kitchen and went to the other room, and I thought there was something a little bit strange on my foot. And I looked down and I saw there was a snail. So I put this snail in the garden and I immediately wrote a poem on that. So
Wow.
Well, I read that and I really loved it. It actually made my day. Yeah, I did read it at the end of the day yesterday.
I would love to read
I'll
that.
share it with you.
maybe I
I
can
will
end with that if we are done with the questions.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Please.
Well, I have, yes, definitely. We would love you to read, but we're not done with the questions. There are a few more. So,
Sure.
would you want to read that once and then we can go back to the question? Whatever suits you.
Sure. Since I spoke of it, let me read it quickly.
Yeah, it's a wonderful poem.
It's on my phone. I put it off because I was getting calls. So give me just a second and I'll open it up again.
And when I read that poem yesterday night, I said, I was wondering what has Nandini gone through today? Where did she meet the snail? It was too late for me to ask you, so I let it be.
No, and sometimes people may, like my brother says that, and my pet name is Choti. He says, Choti, why do the strangest things in the world happen to you? So I said, it's not that they only happen to me, it's just that I write about them. So, where is it? Maybe I can take a question, till this opens up.
Okay, Charlene, are you around?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, thank you, Mehra, for giving this opportunity. Well, Mehra, ma'am, first of all, the way you allow your feelings to, seep into your words, it actually feels as if, they were just meant to be in it. And coming to my question, ma'am, how do you get over your writing block?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
Charlene was asking, how do you get over your writer's block? Right,
Oh.
Charlene? That's your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Since I write more or less every day, I don't want to jinx it, but I haven't had a prolonged writer's block for a while. But I sense it happens sometimes when my day gets too full. There's too much going on and I'm dealing with a lot of different things, and then I feel quite overwhelmed and I can't always write. And for me, the best way to get rid of that feeling is to be in nature. And when I'm in nature, I have found that I'm able to leave things there when I come back into my life. So a lot of things that might be contributing to a writer's block, I will tuck into little trees and I'll come out of it. And then more or less I find that way works for me. Just being in nature, being under the open skies, being near trees, being near water. And then the other thing is, this writer's block thing can also not be a complete block, right? It can also be like you're writing, but something's not feeling right. Something's not gelling. It doesn't seem authentic. And sometimes all I need, and I think it might be true for others, is to not force it. Let it be. Time is not running away. There is no deadline to write that poem. Maybe that poem needs a little bit more time. Maybe it needs a little bit more thought. So if there is a block, that's also fine. The idea for me is to keep the process as natural as possible. So from my side, yes, I'll do a few things to make myself feel more at ease, but I won't push myself to write a poem that doesn't seem to be working. I'll wait. Thank you.
You found your poem? The snails come back?
Yes, it is. All right, let's read about the snail. A dot of a snail climbed onto my foot. What a clever snail indeed. An impatient little gastropod, and me, his faithful steed. I took him to the kitchen, to the bedroom soon we went, to the foyer and the garden, grabbed a snack for the handsome gent. I wondered where he came from. Was his mum looking for her son? Did he think I needed a faithful pet, or did he think I was one? I searched for a cosmic meaning, an animal spirit's tale, but remembered instead a children's book, The Lovely Snail and the Whale. Hold it there a minute. Me a whale? That's out of line. It's only a matter of proportions, and mine, well, are just fine. I've gained a bit of weight for sure, not without good reason. What's a sensible girl to do? It's the middle of mango season. My middle has somewhat expanded, as has my heart with joy, but I will not be trifled with. I'm no one's trifling toy. So I walked our friend to a verdant patch and left him there to munch, and thought no more of whales or snails, and got myself some lunch. And a mango, one.
So nice, ma'am. Loved it.
Thank you. Just a silly poem, but that's what came to me.
But it was so refreshing and nice. It was really good.
Thank you.
Arunima, would you like to ask ma'am something before we, try to wrap it up?
My question is that how is poetry related to unrest?
Okay, her question is, how is poetry related to unrest?
Unrest. How is poetry related to unrest? Well, the way I think of it is there can be, broadly, there is an internal unrest, an internal churn. And poetry can be the medicine for that churn. It can be the balm for that churn. It can be the expression for that unrest. If the unrest is external, as we see in so many things in the world that cause us unrest or seem unfair, unjust, then poetry can be a sword, poetry can be a voice, poetry can be something that leadership and power will fear. As we have seen, there have been poets locked up in jails for just the words they have spoken. So never underestimate where your words can take you. And I'm not saying they'll take you to jail, but I'm saying that don't underestimate the power that words can still hold in these times. Because when someone is naughty and they do naughty things when they have power, then they fear the ones who know how to use the words, right? So in those times, in times of unrest, bring your poems out as weapons and don't be afraid to use them.
Right, Arunima? Okay. Anushka has something to tell you. She's been reading up about you, doing a lot of homework since the last that we discussed, you and your poems in our last book club. So, okay, Anushka, tell us what you would really want to tell us.
Ma'am, I too have read your website and blog and also many poems from your book Words Within, which was released a year ago, and I really loved those poems. The ratings in Goodreads was 4.7 and on Amazon Kindle
Where I got it, it was 4.9, and it seemed like a really great accomplishment. Don't you feel so?
Sorry, I didn't understand the last bit of the question. What was that?
Ma'am, I was
asking you a
the
question.
ratings. Yes, ma'am. You got really high ratings of your
Oh, I
book.
got high ratings.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I bribed people with sweets to write me good things.
But she's read up
Ma'am,
your
I
reviews.
also-
She has some to read to us.
Yeah.
Thank
Ma'am, I
you.
read the reviews and many stated that most of your poems were moving, mesmerizing. And the imagery, that is one of the things I admire in your writing. My personal opinion and many fan reviews said that your imagery was exceptional and your way with words, it actually speaks from heart to heart. The people who read your book conveyed that it was something for everyone. A soothing balm for frayed nerves and restless souls, and a thoughtful and engaging read. They said that Nandini leaves the readers with a whirlwind of emotion, gathering momentum within the walls of their chest. All I felt while reading this was pure and simple delight. Ma'am, I also wanted to ask a question that personally, which poem is your favorite?
Oh my. Thank you firstly for going through all these comments and bringing them to share with me. I'm very moved by how much you have read and and you thought that you would like to share it. So that's very moving. Favorite, I don't know. Like I said, Peanut Shells is precious because it opened the doorway to this book. The poems that I've written for my mother and father are precious in their own way, right? But I can't really, I wish I could give you one poem that is my number one poem closest to my heart, but unfortunately I can't.
Oh, I see, ma'am. Well, all of us here are very pleased to see you accomplishing great things. And we also want to congratulate you on your well-deserved success.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Nandini. It's been such a delightful and enlightening session.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved the questions and I've loved the interaction. I hope you got something out of it, not just about my poems, but just about poetry and the beautiful world of poetry in general. And I would love to read some of the poems. So Farah, if you feel like, I would love to read, if you can
I'll
send
send them
me
across.
the poems, I would love to read what talented young people are writing now.
Wait, I have something in store for you. I'm not sending you without a small gift.
Oh my.
Proma, Proma, are you here? She's written a wonderful poem to wrap this session and she wants to present it to you.
How lovely.
Proma is a voracious reader and writes well.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here. I would like to end up this session by reading out a poem that I wrote. An open letter to the poets and writers I know and the ones I don't know yet. You are the sunset and the sunrise all at once, a compilation of intricacies handcrafted for you by you. You are your own God. You are the sun and the moon and her stars, and nothing can ever hinder that. Your words are streaked with the beautiful yellow shade of the sunlight and the grey clouds that have the ability to cover it. You are both the storm and a hand to guide me through it. You are made of oceans, and your words are raging waves, coursing through your veins, begging for the ink on the shore to save them. You can conjure up a tsunami with every letter you form and drown the whole world, but instead, we are swimming in the beauty of your words. Your mind is made up of constellations, waiting to be discovered, and supernovas awaiting the chance to burst, and every so often they do, and the earth ceases to spin and gazes at your gorgeous lights in amazement. You've got stars placed in between your fingers, glowing with every stroke of your pen, and even they are excited to see how you'll use them to adorn every word. You are the artist, sketching love letters in calligraphy on every single soul, leaving a mark of your wonders on everyone who you have art in their bloodstreams. Turn the world into a forest and burn it down. It deserves to hear your voice. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well done. How lovely. How lovely.
Thank you so much, Mom.
Thank you so much for sharing it.
It has
I'll
been
have
my
some of the poems shared with you, definitely.
Please do. I would love to read them.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this delightful evening. Thank you for making time, Nandini.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone. Happy writing, happy reading.
Thank you so much.
Happy.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful evening.